Mrs Harris, thank you very much indeed. It's a pleasure to speak in this debate. And let me start with first things first. I utterly condemn the attacks of the 7th of October. I utterly condemn the kidnap, the torture and the murder of hostages by Hamas. And I utterly deplore and condemn the destruction of Palestine and Palestinian life that has now ensued. That destruction is now so complete that Israel is in risk of turning Gaza to a desert and calling it peace. That prosecution of the war is now so brutal that the Foreign Secretary himself said on the 2nd of September that any exports of weapons here leads to a clear risk that they might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international law, because the Foreign Secretary was followed by the Secretary of State for Business and Trade, who said now that there are significant risks about Israel's record of compliance. In court, His Majesty's government has said it bluntly in its opening statement on the 12th of November 2024. I quote, "Israel is not committed to complying with international humanitarian law." And yet the government has not cancelled all licences. It has cancelled some, but it has not cancelled all. And indeed, it has kept the licences for F-35 parts open. Now, last week in front of our committee, the Defence Minister, I won't give away because time is so short, last week in front of my committee, the Defence Minister said it is technically possible to track these parts, but it is contractually impossible. Indeed, Lockheed Martin supplied me with a letter to say that if I want to know anything about the parts, I need to address our queries to the Department of Defence in the United States. The government defends its case by pointing to the 28 words that allow it to make it up as it goes along when it comes to weapons exports. And those were the words actually written by the last government, published in the House on the 8th of December 2021. And they say this, they say the application of these criteria, the selective licensing criteria, will be without prejudice to the application to specific cases of specific measures as may be announced to Parliament from time to time. And there you have it. But of course what the Minister did not explain is clause 1b in the criteria. Clause 1b says the government will not grant a licence if to do so would be inconsistent with the UK's obligations under the UN Arms Trade Treaty. And of course the UN Arms Trade Treaty, Mrs Harris, is really very, very clear. Article 7 requires this government as a signatory to assess any items that we may be seeking to export. And if there is an overriding risk of the use of these weapons to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law, I quote, "The exporting state party shall not authorise the export." Now, if there was any question, if there was any doubt, if there was any dispute about whether F-35 parts that we supply could be used in such a way, then perhaps the government would have a case for keeping these licences open. But there is not any doubt, dispute or question about the government's analysis of F-35 parts, because in its opening statement to the High Court on the 12th of November 2024, it said this: "The F-35 carve-out accepts that there is a clear risk that F-35 components might be used to commit or facilitate a serious violation of international humanitarian law." We now have the ICJ advisory, we have the arrest warrants, we have the government's own assessment. I cannot now see how this government can legally defend a position to keep these arms export licences